Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was an ordinary day in a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Eleanor Brooks sat at her usual corner table, a cup of coffee in front of her, her fingers tapping absently on the rim. At 65, Eleanor had built a reputation as one of the most powerful women in the world of business. She had everything anyone could ask for: money, status, and a life that many would envy. Yet, despite all of her success, there was something missing. A sense of connection. A sense of family. The kind of bond that only love could provide. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden buzz of her phone. It was a message from her lawyer, confirming a meeting about her latest business venture. But as she stared at the screen, something caught her eye. A missed call from an unknown number. Without thinking, she answered it. On the other end of the line, there was a brief pause, followed by a nervous voice. "Is this Eleanor Brooks?" She raised an eyebrow. The voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. "Yes, this is Eleanor." "Who is this?" The voice hesitated for a moment. "I'm Mark Davis. I know this might sound strange, but I need your help. I was wondering if you'd consider marrying me." For a split second, Eleanor was taken aback. Marrying her? Out of nowhere? The absurdity of the situation almost made her laugh. But then she remembered why she was lonely. Why she was seeking something more than just business. A connection. Someone who might understand her. Someone who, like her, had lived through loss and change. Mark quickly explained his situation. He was struggling with mounting debts, and his family was pressuring him to marry for financial stability. "I know this sounds crazy," he continued, "but I'm asking for a business arrangement. Nothing more, nothing less. We could both benefit from it. I just need someone to stand by me for a little while. I thought maybe you could help me." Eleanor took a deep breath, processing his words. She wasn't naive, she knew exactly what he was asking. A contract marriage. It wasn't love, but it could give her the companionship she craved, and it would allow her to finally take control of the legacy she had worked so hard to build. She paused for a moment before replying, her voice steady. "All right, let's talk about the details." And just like that, Mark Davis, a man she had never met, became a part of her life. Eleanor wasn't sure what would come of this unusual arrangement, but something inside her told her that this wouldn't be just another business deal. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something she had been searching for all along. But before they could even begin to navigate the terms of their agreement, Eleanor had no idea just how much her life and her heart would change in the days to come. As Eleanor sat in her office the next day, her mind kept drifting back to the phone call with Mark. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in her life. At first, she thought it was just another random request, something she could brush off. But as she went over the details, she realized there was something about the whole situation that felt different. The loneliness she had been trying to ignore for years suddenly felt more real. Maybe Mark's proposal wasn't just a business transaction. Maybe it was a way out of her own emotional prison. Eleanor had everything anyone could want: wealth, power, influence, but the one thing she lacked was something simple: genuine human connection. Later that afternoon, Mark's lawyer reached out to her to confirm the meeting. He sent over the basic terms of the arrangement, an official contract that would guarantee their marriage for a year, no personal commitments, and no interference in each other's lives. It was purely business, and neither of them would be bound by love or affection. But as she read through the details, Eleanor couldn't help but feel a strange sense of curiosity. Was this really the life she wanted? To live solely in her empire, surrounded by wealth and luxury, but isolated from anything real? She sat back in her chair, staring at the document on her screen. Was it possible that she, a woman who had everything, could find something valuable in a contract marriage? The more she thought about it, the more she realized this might just be the escape she had been looking for. It wasn't love, but maybe it was something close enough. She picked up the phone and dialed Mark's number. The phone rang for what seemed like an eternity before his voice finally answered. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Eleanor could almost hear the wheels turning in Mark's head, weighing his words carefully. His words hung in the air, and Eleanor found herself feeling strangely relieved. At least he wasn't pretending this would be anything more than it was. There was no romantic fantasy here, just two people needing each other in different ways. The next day, Eleanor arrived at the upscale cafe where they had agreed to meet. She walked inside, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee greeting her as she stepped into the elegant, dimly lit room. Mark was already there, sitting at a corner table with a manila folder in front of him. He looked almost out of place in his simple suit, not the type of person you would expect to see in a place like this. But his eyes were sharp, and his posture spoke of someone who had been through more than his fair share of hardship. As she walked over to him, Mark stood up, offering her a seat. Eleanor took her time, studying him closely. He wasn't a millionaire in the traditional sense, with his polished image and wealth gleaming from every corner. He was just a man who had been caught in a difficult situation. And in that moment, Eleanor could see the weight of it all in his eyes. She didn't know what drove him to this point, but she knew that something about him felt genuine. Something she hadn't felt in years. Eleanor nodded slowly, glancing down at the folder he had brought with him. She could see the terms laid out clearly in front of her, and yet, something told her this wasn't just a legal document. There was a human element here. A need for connection that both of them shared, even if they didn't fully acknowledge it. They spent the next hour discussing the contract. Mark explained his situation in more detail, telling her how his family was pressuring him to marry for financial security, and how he needed a way out. He assured her that their arrangement would not interfere with either of their lives, but he needed her help to get the approval of his family and business partners. Eleanor listened intently, her mind whirling with possibilities. She could already see the benefits. The public nature of the marriage would keep her from further scrutiny, and she would no longer have to be alone, especially at the upcoming charity gala where her presence was expected. Mark, for his part, seemed to want nothing more than to escape his family's control. But as the meeting drew to a close, Eleanor realized that there was more to this deal than just the financial benefits. There was something deeper, something that made her wonder if, perhaps, this was the beginning of something that could change both of their lives. She stood up from the table, looking down at Mark with a mixture of curiosity and resolve. "I'll agree to this," she said, her voice firm. "But on one condition. We do this on our own terms. No one else can know." "Not yet." She paused, feeling a strange sense of anticipation building inside her. "We'll do this, Mark. But I want to be in control. For once, I want to make the decisions." Mark nodded, a hint of gratitude in his eyes. With the deal set, Eleanor couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. She didn't know what was ahead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she had found something that could truly change her life. The next few days flew by in a blur of paperwork, legal documents, and quiet meetings. Eleanor and Mark stuck to their agreement, each playing their part in a carefully crafted arrangement. Eleanor's life, as it had been before, felt like a distant memory. No longer was she consumed by the endless meetings and charity galas. No longer did she have to face the cold emptiness of her vast penthouse alone. Now, she had Mark, at least in name. The arrangement was simple. They were married on paper, but not in heart. They each stayed in their own worlds, never crossing boundaries that weren't necessary. For Eleanor, it was a temporary solution, a break from the constant loneliness. But as the days passed, something began to change. She started to notice Mark in ways she hadn't before. He wasn't the businessman she had expected him to be. He was far more human. The first time they had dinner together, she realized how much she missed genuine conversation. He didn't treat her like the powerful CEO she was, he treated her like a person. And that, for once, felt like a relief. One evening, Eleanor invited Mark to join her for dinner at her place. It had been a week since they signed the contract, and she thought it was time to see how far their arrangement would go. When Mark arrived, Eleanor noticed he seemed more relaxed than usual, his stiff posture from their earlier meetings softened. He had shed his business attire for a simple sweater and jeans, looking much more approachable. They shared a quiet meal, the conversation flowing naturally as they talked about everything and nothing what he did as a consultant, her thoughts on expanding her empire, and even small things like their favorite books or childhood memories. Eleanor found herself laughing more than she had in years. For a moment, it felt like they were just two people having a meal together. No contracts, no expectations. Just company. Later that night, as they sat on the balcony with glasses of wine, Eleanor found herself staring out at the city skyline, the lights twinkling like stars in the distance. The silence between them was comfortable. Mark was looking at her, his eyes focused and serious. Eleanor felt a strange pressure in her chest, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. It was the kind of feeling that made her want to open up something she hadn't done in years. Mark set his glass down and turned toward her, his expression thoughtful. "What do you mean?" he asked gently. She took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "I mean, this, whatever this is. It feels real. Not in the way I expected, but in a way I didn't anticipate. You've been more honest with me than anyone ever has. And, I don't know, it's strange, but I'm starting to think I made the right choice." She met his gaze, her voice trembling slightly. "Not just for you, but for me too. Maybe I needed this more than I realized." There was a long pause as Mark looked at her, his brow furrowed in thought. Then, without warning, he reached out and gently took her hand in his. Eleanor froze, her breath catching in her throat. She had been expecting him to pull away, to make a joke about their situation, but instead, he held her hand, looking at her with something that could have been tenderness. At that moment, Eleanor realized that the arrangement they had made wasn't just a contract anymore. It had evolved into something more than either of them had expected. They were no longer just two strangers tied together by a legal document. There was a connection between them, one that neither could deny, even if it hadn't been planned. It wasn't love, at least not yet, but it was something real, something that had been missing in both of their lives. As the night went on, they spoke more, their conversation turning deeper, more personal. It was a quiet kind of intimacy, no pressure, no rush. Just two people finding solace in each other's company. Eleanor felt something inside her shift, a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. She wasn't sure where this was going, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. But little did they know, this connection, this bond they were forming wasn't just going to change their lives. It was about to take a dramatic turn that neither could have anticipated. Days passed, and the unspoken connection between Eleanor and Mark grew stronger. Their arrangement, which had started as a business contract, now felt more like a partnership. They shared their lives, their worries, and their dreams, all without the expectations of a romantic relationship. Eleanor found herself looking forward to their time together, whether it was a quiet dinner or a conversation on the balcony under the stars. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: comfort. But, despite the comfort, Eleanor still kept a distance. She was determined not to let herself get too attached. After all, this was still just a contract. The truth was, she had a lot at stake. If she let herself fall in love, it could complicate everything: her empire, her control, her carefully built life. One evening, as Eleanor prepared for an important charity gala, she couldn't help but notice how much she had changed since meeting Mark. The elegant gown she wore felt heavier now, as if it were no longer just a symbol of status, but of something more personal. Something that connected her to the life she was trying to build with Mark, even if it wasn't quite love yet. Mark, dressed in his suit, stood by the window, watching the bustling city outside. He had become a part of her world, though neither of them had yet acknowledged the depth of their bond. As they got ready to leave for the gala, Eleanor hesitated, unsure of how to feel. "Are you ready?" Mark asked, turning to her with a small smile. His presence was reassuring, and for a moment, she allowed herself to relax in the warmth of his company. "I think so," Eleanor replied, adjusting the straps of her dress. "I just keep thinking about how much has changed since we agreed to this arrangement. I didn't expect to be here, Mark." Mark's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, their eyes met with an unspoken understanding. "I didn't expect it either," he said quietly, his voice tinged with sincerity. "But I'm glad we're here." The simple words were enough to send a wave of warmth through Eleanor's chest. She could feel the weight of the evening ahead off the expectations, the masks they would wear, and the roles they would play for the world. But for a brief moment, she forgot about all of that. All that mattered was the connection they shared. As they arrived at the gala, the atmosphere was filled with grandeur. Elegant guests mingled, their conversations hushed, their laughter like the soft hum of distant music. Eleanor and Mark made their entrance together, drawing a few curious glances, but no one questioned their partnership. To the world, they were just another high-powered couple. But to Eleanor, it was becoming something more. During the evening, as the speeches and toasts were made, Eleanor found herself watching Mark closely. She couldn't help but notice how effortlessly he fit into this world, charming, confident, and completely at ease. He wasn't the man she had expected when they first met. She had thought he would be stiff, awkward, perhaps a little lost in such a high-profile setting. But instead, he shone in his own way. His eyes sparkled with a quiet intensity as he spoke to various people, and Eleanor couldn't deny the sense of pride that swelled in her chest. Later in the evening, as they stood on the terrace, the city lights twinkling below them, Mark turned to her, his expression serious. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low. "I know this whole thing started as a business deal, but I can't keep pretending it's just that. I've come to realize that whatever this is between yous, it's real. I didn't expect to feel this way. And I don't want to keep pretending that I don't care." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't ready for it. The walls she had built around her heart were starting to crumble, and she wasn't sure if she was strong enough to stop it. Mark reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. "I'm not asking for anything right now," he continued. "But I need you to know that I care. And if you feel the same way, maybe we can make this something real." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Eleanor's mind raced, her thoughts a blur. She had never expected Mark to confess his feelings so openly. She had been trying to keep everything compartmentalized at business, personal, and the contract they had signed. But now, it all felt blurred together. She looked at Mark, the man who had once seemed so far removed from her world, now standing in front of her, vulnerable and sincere. For the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to feel the weight of the decision before her. She had spent so much of her life guarding her heart, but now, she wondered if it was time to let someone in. Mark had already become more than just a contract partner. He was someone she trusted, someone she relied on. And maybe, just maybe, he could be the person she had been looking for all along. But before she could answer, a voice interrupted them, and the moment passed. As they turned back to join the party, Eleanor couldn't help but wonder what the future would hold for them. Was this the beginning of something more? Or was it just another chapter in a story that was still being written? The days following the gala were filled with an odd sense of calm, yet Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. She had spent so much time building her empire, hiding behind her success, but now, with Mark's words lingering in her mind, she found herself questioning everything. She had never allowed herself to be vulnerable, and yet Mark had seen past her walls. Their arrangement was supposed to be temporary, a way to solve a problem, but now it felt like something much more complicated. She wasn't sure if she was ready to admit it, but she had begun to look forward to their time together, whether it was a shared meal or a quiet conversation. She found herself thinking about him more than she cared to admit, even wondering what life would be like without him in it. Mark, on the other hand, seemed just as distant, though she could tell he was also conflicted. He had made his feelings clear at the gala, but he didn't push her. He gave her space, never demanding anything beyond the agreement they had made. It was strange, this balance between them, both of them holding back, neither willing to take the next step, yet both unsure if they were willing to let go of what had started to form between them. One evening, as Eleanor sat in her office, looking over some documents, she received a call from Mark. His voice on the other end was steady, but there was an underlying tension in it. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you," he said, his tone a little more serious than usual. She put down the papers in front of her, her curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral, though she couldn't hide the slight worry that crept in. Mark paused for a moment before speaking again. "I think it's time we have a real conversation about what comes next. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I can't keep pretending this is just a contract." His words hung in the air, each one more loaded than the last. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to say. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time, she realized how much he meant to her. This wasn't just a business deal anymore. This was becoming something real, and it terrified her. "What are you saying, Mark?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to remain calm. Mark's response was quieter than usual, almost hesitant. "I'm saying that I care about you, Eleanor. And I don't want this to end just because we've fulfilled the terms of our agreement. I want more than just a contract. I want to see where this could go. But only if you feel the same way." His words were raw, stripped of any pretense, and Eleanor could tell that this wasn't just another one of his calculated moves. This was him, vulnerable and honest, and it made her heart ache. For a moment, Eleanor was silent. She could feel the weight of his confession pressing down on her, but she wasn't ready to admit how she felt. It wasn't just the fear of opening up, it was the fear of what would happen next. If she let herself fall for him, if they crossed that line, everything would change. But could she keep denying what was slowly becoming clear in her heart? Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice softer now, but still filled with uncertainty. "Mark, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. I don't know if I can give you more than what we agreed on. I'm scared of what it would mean for us, for me. I've worked so hard to build my life, and I don't want to lose control of it." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "But I can't ignore how I feel. I can't pretend this isn't affecting me." Her voice faltered slightly, a crack in the wall she had so carefully built around her heart. Mark was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with understanding. "I get it, Eleanor. I'm not asking you to rush into anything. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to take this slow. Whatever happens, we can figure it out together." His words, calm and reassuring, gave her a sense of comfort she hadn't expected. It was as if, for the first time, she wasn't alone in this. After their conversation, Eleanor sat back in her chair, her mind racing with thoughts and emotions. She wasn't sure where this was going, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just playing a part in her own life. Maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to see where this connection with Mark could take them. The next few days were filled with a strange tension. Neither of them spoke about the conversation again, but the unspoken understanding hung in the air. They continued their daily routines, their professional lives intertwined with the growing personal connection between them. Eleanor still wasn't ready to admit it, but the walls around her heart were starting to crumble. And with each passing day, she found herself caring more and more about the man who had once been nothing more than a business partner in a fake marriage. She wasn't sure if she was ready to take the leap, but one thing was certain: things were changing. And she couldn't deny it anymore. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Eleanor and Mark. They navigated their lives together, each day feeling a little more complicated than the last. Eleanor had spent her entire life in control of her business, her public image, and her personal space. But now, with Mark by her side, she felt a shift, a pull towards something she wasn't sure she was ready to fully embrace. Despite their agreement, the boundaries between them were starting to blur. They spent more time together, talking more, laughing more. There were moments when Eleanor caught herself looking at him not as her contract partner, but as someone who was slowly becoming indispensable to her. It was frightening, yet undeniable. Mark, too, seemed to be struggling with the change. Though he had made his feelings clear, he never pushed her. He was patient, letting her process everything in her own time. One evening, as Eleanor sat at her desk, reviewing some new proposals, Mark knocked on her office door. She had been working late, the soft glow of her desk lamp casting shadows around the room. He stepped in, dressed in casual clothes, his usual suit replaced with a simple shirt and jeans. There was a warmth in his eyes that caught her attention immediately. He didn't speak at first, just watched her for a moment, his gaze soft. Eleanor paused her work, looking up at him. "What is it, Mark?" she asked, her voice a little uncertain, as though she was waiting for something. Mark hesitated for a moment, then closed the door behind him, stepping into the room. "I need to talk to you about something," he said, his tone serious. Eleanor's heart raced slightly, sensing that this was more than just another casual conversation. She set the papers aside and gave him her full attention. "What's on your mind?" she asked, trying to sound calm, though she couldn't shake the sudden sense of anticipation. Mark took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "I know we've been taking this slow, and I've respected your space," he began. "But I can't keep pretending that I don't care about you. I don't want to hide behind this arrangement anymore. It's not just about the contract, Eleanor. It never was. And I think it's time to face the truth." Her pulse quickened at his words. She knew what he was saying, even if he wasn't coming right out and saying it. He was admitting what she had already felt, but had been too afraid to acknowledge. It was terrifying to think of what could come next off the consequences of letting this connection turn into something real. But as she looked at him, there was something in his eyes that made her heart soften. It was a vulnerability she hadn't expected from him, and it disarmed her. Mark continued, his voice a little softer now. "I don't want to be just a business partner to you. I want to be more. I want to be someone you can rely on, someone you can trust. I'm asking you to take this step with me, Eleanor, not because of some contract, but because of what we've built together. It's not just a partnership, Anna Marie, it's real." Eleanor stared at him for a long moment, her mind racing. She had been so focused on keeping her life compartmentalized, on keeping control, that she hadn't allowed herself to fully experience what was happening between them. But now, Mark was asking her to let go of her fear, to step into the unknown with him. And in that moment, she realized that she had been wanting to take that step all along. Her voice was quiet but firm when she finally spoke. "I'm scared, Mark. I've built everything I have on my own. I'm not used to letting someone in, not like this. I've never allowed myself to depend on anyone, not even on you. But I don't want to lose this. What we have. It means something to me too." Mark's face softened, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I'm not asking you to lose yourself, Eleanor. I just want you to see that we can be something more than what we've been. You don't have to give up control to find happiness. You just need to trust that we're in this together." For the first time, Eleanor truly believed him. There was no more pretension, no more walls between them. She felt the weight of his words settle in her chest, the truth of them sinking deep into her heart. She hadn't realized how much she needed this until now, until Mark had shown her that it was possible to have something real, something lasting. They stood there for a moment, the silence between them filled with unspoken understanding. Then, Eleanor took a step forward, closing the space between them. "Okay," she said softly, her voice filled with resolve. "Let's do this, together." Mark reached for her hand, his grip steady, and for the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something more. Something that wasn't just a contract or a fleeting arrangement, but something that could last. And in that moment, she realized that she wasn't afraid anymore. The days that followed marked a turning point for both Eleanor and Mark. With their agreement now shifting into something more genuine, there was an undeniable sense of change in the air. Eleanor had always been the one in control, the one who called the shots, but now, as she spent more time with Mark, she found herself letting go of some of that control, allowing herself to be more open and vulnerable. It wasn't easy, but she couldn't deny the feelings that had been growing between them. They were no longer just two people pretending to be married for convenience. There was something deeper now, a connection that neither of them could ignore. However, as they began to explore the new dynamic, a shadow from Eleanor's past reappeared, threatening to unravel everything they had started to build. One evening, as Eleanor was preparing for an upcoming business deal, she received an unexpected call. It was from her lawyer, and the urgency in his voice immediately caught her attention. "Eleanor, we need to talk about something important. It's regarding the contract with your family's estate. There's a new complication that you need to be aware of." Her stomach dropped. Her family's business was something she had worked so hard to distance herself from, but now, it seemed like it was coming back to haunt her. She excused herself from the meeting with Mark and stepped into her private office, trying to steady her breath. The lawyer explained that her family, who had always disapproved of her independence, was now attempting to challenge her control of the estate. They were questioning her decision to remain unmarried, using her arrangement with Mark as ammunition against her. It was as if her success, her independence, everything she had worked for, was now being questioned by the very people she had tried to escape from. Eleanor's mind raced as she listened to the lawyer explain the legal implications, the pressure she had felt growing up, constantly being told she wasn't enough, that she wasn't fit to lead the family business, was suddenly crashing back down on her. She sat there, her hands trembling slightly as she hung up the phone. Mark had been a source of comfort for her in recent weeks, but now she felt the weight of everything pushing down on her. She had been doing so well at carving out her own life, but now, it seemed like her past was coming back to reclaim her. She couldn't let it happen. Not now. Not after everything she had fought for. Later that evening, Mark noticed a change in her. She had been quiet, distant, and he could tell something was wrong. "Eleanor, what's going on?" he asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. She hesitated, unsure of how to explain the sudden rush of emotions that had overwhelmed her. But Mark's steady presence, his calm demeanor, made her feel safe. "It's my family," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're trying to take everything from me again. They're questioning my control of the estate, using this arrangement with you against me." Mark sat down next to her, taking her hand in his. "Eleanor, you've built everything you have. You don't have to let them control you anymore. You're stronger than this. And I'm here for you, whatever happens." His words, simple yet powerful, cut through the chaos in her mind. It wasn't just about the business anymore, it was about her. And she realized, in that moment, that Mark wasn't just there for the arrangement. He was there for her fully, completely. She looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper. "I'm scared, Mark. What if they succeed? What if everything I've worked for falls apart?" Mark squeezed her hand, his eyes steady and unwavering. "We'll face it together, Eleanor. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in what felt like forever, Eleanor allowed herself to lean on someone else, to trust that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to fight everything on her own. She had built her empire, but it wasn't the only thing that mattered anymore. There was Mark, and there was the life they were beginning to build together. And as she sat there with him, she knew that no matter what her family tried to do, they would face it together. That was something worth fighting for. The weeks that followed were filled with tension, but also a sense of unity between Eleanor and Mark. They faced the threat from her family together, navigating the complex world of legal battles and family politics. Eleanor had never been more grateful for Mark's support. He didn't just stand by her, he stood up for her, fighting for the control she had worked so hard to achieve. Despite the legal battles, Eleanor felt a growing sense of security. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. She had someone she could count on, someone who wasn't just there for her success, but for who she truly was. It was a strange feeling, one she hadn't anticipated when she first agreed to this arrangement. But now, she couldn't imagine her life without Mark. As they spent more time together, their connection deepened in ways neither of them had expected. The lines between business and personal blurred, and Eleanor began to realize that their partnership was no longer just a contractual agreement. It was becoming something real. She found herself looking forward to their quiet moments, the little gestures of care, the way Mark made her feel seen in a world that had always been about power and control. And, despite her fear of letting go, Eleanor couldn't help but let herself trust him. Mark wasn't just her business partner anymore, was the person she wanted to face the world with. One evening, after a particularly stressful day of meetings and legal documents, Mark suggested they take a break. "Let's go for a walk," he said, his voice soothing. Eleanor hesitated for a moment but agreed, realizing she needed a moment to clear her mind. They walked through the quiet streets of the city, the night air cool but not uncomfortable. As they walked side by side, Eleanor felt a calm she hadn't felt in a long time. "You know," Eleanor began, her voice soft as they walked, "I never thought I'd be here. I never thought I'd let someone in. I've spent my whole life building this empire, protecting myself from everyone." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "But I've never felt this real with you. It's strange, but it feels like we're building something that's more than just a partnership. It feels like we're becoming a team." Mark smiled, his hand brushing against hers. "We are a team, Eleanor. We've always been. You just had to let yourself see it. His words were gentle, but there was an honesty in them that touched her deeply. They stopped walking in front of a small park, the lights from the street lamps casting a warm glow over the path. Mark turned to face her, his expression serious but filled with warmth. "Eleanor," he said, his voice quieter now, "I don't want you to ever feel like you're alone again. I'm here. And I want to be here for you, not just in the ways we've talked about, but in every way. Whatever happens with your family, with your business, I'm with you. You don't have to do this by yourself anymore." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. She had always prided herself on being independent, but the truth was, she had never allowed herself to be truly vulnerable. Mark was offering her something more than just support, was offering her the chance to let go of the walls she had built around herself. For the first time, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be in control of everything. Maybe it was okay to let someone else in. She looked up at him, her eyes softening. "I don't know how to let go of all the control," she admitted, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "I've built everything myself. But with you, I don't feel like I have to protect myself all the time. I don't know what this is, Mark, but I want to see where it goes. I want to see what we can build together." Mark stepped closer, taking her hand in his. "Then let's build it, Eleanor. Together." His voice was filled with sincerity, and in that moment, Eleanor knew that whatever happened, they were ready to face it together. The future was still uncertain, and the battles ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, Eleanor didn't feel afraid. She felt hopeful. They stood there for a moment, the city lights around them glowing softly, as the weight of their conversation settled into both of them. They had come a long way from the cold contract that had started it all. Now, it was no longer about a deal or an arrangement, it was about trust, partnership, and the possibility of something more. And as they walked back to their apartment, side by side, Eleanor couldn't help but wonder how far they could go. Together. The following weeks felt like a dream for Eleanor and Mark. They had faced the toughest challenge of their lives together, Eleanor's family trying to take back control of her estate, and yet, they had come out stronger on the other side. The legal battles were far from over, but with Mark by her side, Eleanor felt an overwhelming sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She no longer had to hide behind the walls she'd built around herself. For the first time, she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to trust someone completely. And that someone was Mark. As they continued to navigate the challenges, their connection only deepened, turning into something undeniable. It wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. It was love, in its most raw and real form. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Eleanor turned to Mark, her heart full of gratitude. "You know," she said softly, "I never thought I'd be here. I never thought I'd be this person, the one who lets someone in. But with you, I've realized that it's okay to lean on someone. I don't have to do everything by myself. And I'm not alone anymore." Mark smiled, his eyes filled with warmth as he took her hand in his. "You never have to be alone, Eleanor. I'm here for you, through everything. We've been through so much together, and I don't think I could imagine my life without you." Eleanor felt a surge of emotion wash over her. She had spent so long building her empire, focusing on her career and her own independence, that she had forgotten the value of real connection. But now, she realized that no amount of success or power could replace the love and trust she had found in Mark. He had been her rock, her partner, and her best friend. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she didn't want to face it without him. The next day, as they walked into the courtroom for the final hearing on her family's challenge to her estate, Eleanor felt a sense of calm she hadn't expected. The battle had been long and exhausting, but with Mark's unwavering support, she had found the strength to keep going. As they sat together in the courtroom, their hands intertwined, Eleanor realized that no matter what the outcome was, she had already won. She had found someone who truly cared for her, someone who believed in her, and someone who was willing to stand by her side, no matter the circumstances. When the judge finally made his ruling, Eleanor's heart raced. The court sided in her favor, granting her full control over the estate. It was a victory, not just for her business, but for her personal life as well. She looked over at Mark, her eyes filled with gratitude. He smiled back at her, and in that moment, she knew that they had done it together. Later that evening, they celebrated their victory in a quiet, intimate way, just the two of them. As they shared a glass of wine and reflected on everything they had been through, Eleanor couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with emotion. She had started this journey alone, afraid of trusting anyone. But now, with Mark by her side, she realized that love wasn't something to be feared. It was something to be embraced. "I never imagined my life would look like this," Eleanor said softly, her eyes filled with emotion. "But I'm so glad it does. I'm so glad you're here." Mark took her hand, his voice steady and sincere. "I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, Eleanor. We've been through so much, but I think we've only just begun. This is just the beginning of our story." As they stood together, looking out at the city skyline, Eleanor realized that the life she had built for herself wasn't just about success and control. It was about love, partnership, and the willingness to open herself up to something real. And with Mark by her side, she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. And so, they embraced the future, not as a contract or an arrangement, but as two people who had found something deeper and more meaningful than either of them could have imagined. It was the start of a new chapter, one filled with love, trust, and the promise of a life built together.